All right, we should be good now.
You ready? All right. We've got an echo. Okay. Okay, this is Monty Sokup with the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. We're about to call this meeting to order. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties so here in the room. So if you give us a second, we're going to try to get that cleaned up.
Is there something that one of us needs to do, Kurt?
You're on your Surface, aren't you?
I'm not on Zoom on my Surface.
Agenda.
Yeah, it's online. We don't have print copies.
Mark.
All right, how are we doing here?
Mark.
Sounds like we got it maybe fixed.
It's because I'm muted still. I think Kurt's still working on it, Monty. Kurt's still working on it.
Okay. Oh, so you're telling me I'm muted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's try again.
Okay, we're going to try it again. Well, we have a little bit of echo here in the room. I don't know what that's like online, but we're going to plow on forward, I think. So I am going to call the meeting to order and take roll and establish a quorum, and then we'll have some opening comments for the meeting. So, taking roll, Ron Gacious,
Present.
Christina Gentry,
I'm present here.
okay, Edith Guffey,
Present.
Thomas Howe,
Here.
Erica Zimmerman,
Here.
Shannon Reed,
Here.
Sarah Waters,
Here.
Tom Allen,
Present.
Monty Sokup, present. Is there anyone else on Zoom from the board that I'm missing? Okay, so that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 9 present, so we have a quorum. And with that, I would turn it over to Leah for the kind of meeting, opening meeting comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. Good morning, everyone. I have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. A few notes on public comment. When the chair calls for public comment, individuals attending in person should approach the podium to indicate they wish to speak. The podium can be raised and lowered, and we encourage you to use this feature to ensure your comments are heard. Individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. Individuals will be called on in the order they appear on the host meeting screen. Please state your name before speaking, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you, and now I'll turn the meeting back over to Mr. Sokup.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Appreciate that. Monty Sokup, Chair. At this point, we're going to open up the floor for public comment. Is there anyone in the room? Seeing no one in the room, is there anyone online that would like to make comment? You see anyone online, Leah? Okay, so having no one online, I'm going to close public comment. And then we will move into approving the minutes. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the November 14, 2022 Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting. Or any discussion.
No, sorry. Mr. Chair, this is Christina Gentry, member receiving who has received housing subsidies. I move that we make a motion to approve minutes from last month's meeting.
Thank you, Christina. So we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Ron Gacious, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll to approve the minutes. And I'm going to call the roll in the same order that I took it. So if you could be ready, that'd be fantastic. Ron Gacious.
Approved.
Christina Gentry.
Approve.
Edith Guffey.
Approved.
Thomas Howe.
Abstain.
Erica Zimmerman.
Approve.
Shannon Reed.
Abstain.
Sarah Waters.
Approve.
Tom Allen.
Approve.
Monty Sokup, approve. Motion passes 7-4, 2 abstentions. Okay, and then we have the agenda. We're moving on to the agenda, regular agenda. We're going to receive a presentation from the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. I just want to welcome Alyssa Ice and give my sincere gratitude for you making the time to be here with us today. For those of you who were not around, Alyssa used to be the Affordable Housing Administrator for the City of Lawrence before she moved on to the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation. So thank you for spending your time to come back and share your expertise with us today. Alyssa's presentation is online. Alyssa, would you like to share screen or do you want me to do that from here?
I'm happy to do whatever's easiest for you guys. What do you think?
If it might be easier for you to go ahead and share screen so you can control the slides if you don't mind.
Yep, I can do that.
Great. Thank you so much again.
Well, thank you everyone for welcoming me back to talk about more housing. Can you see my screen now? The appropriate screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start the presentation. Okay. So I'm the Director of Housing Development at KHRC. So we utilize the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program and the our home development resources and then the National Housing Trust Fund. We also have our Moderate Income Housing Program. Unfortunately, most of those resources are not eligible to be used in Douglas County or in Lawrence. We have utilized MIH in Baldwin City and Eudora. Erica is doing one of those projects right now. So I'm going to focus on the low-income housing tax credit side of the work that we do, but happy to answer any MIH questions at the end. So KHRC is a nonprofit. We are a quasi-state government agency. We are under the umbrella of the Kansas Development Finance Authority, and we do all housing work. If you have any interest in housing, you are generally our constituent. We have homeless services, community solutions, the housing development, which is a division that I run. We have some home ownership programs. We do the weatherization assistance program, and then we do compliance on all of those programs. We are currently in the middle of closing down our Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the CARA program. We have exhausted those resources, and we are working through the Homeowner Assistance Fund, the mortgage assistance program that came out of the COVID relief money. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the low-income housing tax credit program. So my goal today is to talk to you about what that program is and how it works, and then also how KHRC utilizes this resource for development of affordable housing. Every state has a LIHTC program, and so there are, I think then there are 2 cities that have their own LIHTC allocation. So there are 53 ways to run the low-income housing tax credit program, including Washington, D.C. So I'm going to talk about what it is and then how KHRC, how the state of Kansas utilizes it. So this is a program that's been around since 1986, and it is to promote the construction and the rehab of affordable housing. Each state receives an annual allocation, and so the state of Kansas, due to its size and population and its level of poverty, we receive approximately $7.7 million in annual federal low-income housing tax credits, and that's on the 9% side. And we'll talk about all of these things, but it's each allocation is a 10-year allocation. So every time we make like a 500,000 allocation in credits, we're actually making a $5 million allocation in credits, but it's 500,000 every year for 10 years for a project. Every project that receives an allocation of credits, they are signing on to 30 years of affordability as stated through their land use restriction agreement. Last year, the state legislature, part of many housing resources that they passed, one was a state housing tax credit. This is a huge thing for our state. It's a dollar for dollar match on both sides of the credit. So there's a 9% and a 4% low income housing tax credit. And we received a dollar for dollar match on both sides. We will make those first awards in 2023. So the applications that we will receive on Friday, January 6th will be the first time we allocate those credits. In addition to the low-income housing tax credit, we often utilize our home funds, which the city of Lawrence also has. So we utilize our home funds for our LIHTC projects, and then we also get the state allocation for the National Housing Trust Fund. This is a resource that we oftentimes put in our low-income housing tax credit projects, and when we put that money in, it brings our those rents and those units down to to be affordable to the extremely low income households in those units. And so that's going to be that 30% AMI, whereas the home program and the tax credit program are generally at 60% AMI. The National Housing Trust Fund has a 30-year commitment for those units. Home is generally a 20-year. So this is a visual of what a low-income housing tax credit project can look like. It's the journey that it takes. Oftentimes, like I mentioned, with the Home and National Housing Trust Fund, those funds are going to come from HUD. And so the oversight of those programs, the allocation, the priority of those funds is going to be dictated by HUD. The low-income housing tax credit program the compliance is through Treasury. And so we are bringing those 2 resources together at the State Housing Finance Agency, and then we are allocating those projects to developers. How the tax credit program works is when we allocate the credits to a developer or to a generally a single use limited partnership, the investors are investing into that project. And so we are allocating credits to the developer, who is then selling those credits to the investor. The sale of those credits comes into the project, and that is what brings down those rents and those affordability levels, because those properties do not have to sustain the high level of debt that a market rate property will. And so that's how those things are working. So they're all coming together to an affordable housing project. So the document, the governing document that details how we allocate our credits is the qualified allocation plan. Every allocator of low-income housing tax credits has a qualified allocation plan. When I came over to KHRC, our QAP got a full revamp. We utilized a national consultant, and we looked at the whole state and what we needed to be doing to meet the needs of our communities. And so the qualified allocation plan is going to have a selection criteria how we choose the applications that we receive, the underwriting standards, what every project has to meet, and our priorities. So we have 7.7 million in credits. We have the 15th largest state in landmass, so we have a lot of space to cover with a very limited resource. And so how we have chosen to prioritize things is detailed in our selection criteria, but in also our set asides, which we'll go over in a second. That 30-year compliance period is huge. So that's in our qualified allocation plan. And then the income elections. And so this is something that each project has to elect how they're going to determine their affordability. And there's three choices. There's the 40 at 60, the 20 at 50, and then there's a new income averaging, a fairly new income averaging. Nobody uses 20 at 50. Nobody uses state 20 at 50 generally in the whole nation. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about 20 at 50. But the 40 at 60, what it's saying is that to be eligible for tax credits, 40% of the development has to be affordable at 60% AMI. And so that's one election. More often than not, those developments are actually choosing 100 at 60. So it's a full affordable housing complex. But to be eligible, you have to do 40 at 60. Income averaging is something that's been around since 2018, but in the last few weeks, the IRS just set out their final rule on how we can utilize income averaging. And so I imagine that we will see a lot more income averaging projects. And how that works is that you have a project that has 100 units in it, and if and we require as a state that it has to be 100% income averaging, we won't have a portion of market rate. So when they select 100% income averaging, when you look at the incomes of all of the units, they have to average out 60%. And that they have to be in incomes between 20% AMI and 80% AMI. And so that's what that is. And we anticipate that we will see a lot more income averaging because the IRS made it easier to utilize this election. And it also then how that would work is that those 80% AMI units, their rents can go higher. They can have tenants that have a higher income. And so those higher rents can then help offset the operation cost of those 30 and those 20% AMI units, because those units will be affordable to households at 20 or 30% AMI. And so their rents will be lower. And so by averaging them out, they can kind of help assist the incomes of those lower income tenants. This is the link to our current QAP. I think it's probably in your packet, but so the next pieces of this presentation will go over the different pieces of the QAP. Are there any questions so far about just the general LIHTC program?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Monty Sokup, Chair. Two, actually. Why do you think the 2050 is not used?
So it actually has different requirements. It's not as simple as the 20. It's not as simple as the 40 at 60. It requires that 20% of the units have to be affordable at 50%. And then there's other income restrictions that are not in the 40 at 60. Additionally, you only get, even at the 40 at 60, you only get credit for the tax credit units. And so you have to have an investor who's willing to purchase those credits. And so if you're talking about only 20% of a project is affordable to 50%, finding an investor who'd be interested in that small amount of credits could also be a challenge.
Okay. And then you talked about the different criteria, and we've had private developers that are looking at this avenue to build their capital stack. How important do you think is the local participation? Because we're hearing from them that it's important that they get our local dollars before they go to LIHTC projects versus trying to get the LIHTC project and then coming here for assistance. So I'd like to hear your opinion as a person who looks at these applications.
Yes, and I'm going to talk about that in detail, but I think that that's something that we look at both sides of it, before or after, and that's something that we grapple with a lot because these are big, complicated deals. And once, and we all know this, that once we approve an application, it's out of date, right? Once they submitted it, because costs change, circumstances change. And so we have two ways of looking at that. One is if a development comes in with a firm commitment that they are receiving these below market loans and support, which is how we would consider the Lawrence Trust Fund funds, then they get credit for that. And they get credit, I think they get more credit for that at the time of application. But one of the things that we also recognize is that a developer who has a history of going after those funds, even if they can't bring them in at application or they don't get the credit for that, but they do that work throughout the life of the project, we give them credit for that too. And so we do a previous outcome success, I think is how that looks. And so we do give credit for that. And we think that it's important to be able to recognize the money still helps the project. It still will help bring that affordability down or, make it go, get over that hurdle. And so we look at it both ways and we value it at both points.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this point?
Yes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Edith Guppy, member at large. You stated that income averaging will likely be used more often now because the IRS made it easier. Is there a concern that income averaging may disadvantage those that have lower income because income averaging, those with higher incomes may offset some of the expenses for those with lower income?
Well, I don't think so. And for a couple of reasons. One, right now, the LIHTC program, it's different than like housing choice vouchers in that a couple things. So it's different than housing choice vouchers in that the LIHTC program works that we fund the project up front, and oftentimes our units are not affordable to those extremely low income households already, because we know that households at 30% and 40% and 50% are living in tax credit units already, and they are paying the rent at a 60% AMI level. And so now income averaging is going to give more space to make those units more affordable to those households that are very possibly already living in our units. That's one thing. The other thing is that as a state election, as a state requirement, we are going to require that the average is actually lower than 60%. And so it will continue to push those rents down in that affordability to a higher level of affordability through our own QAP and our own elections.
And okay, Erica, I think you have your hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. Erica Zimmerman, Executive Director, Lawrence Habitat. Alyssa, something we talk about a lot is the 30-year affordability period. Do you ever see that changing or increasing? And how is that period determined for this program?
So the 30-year, so the low income housing tax credit program has two phases of affordability. One, the first is the initial compliance period, and then it goes into extended use. And the extended use is the 15 to 30 years. This is a question as background for the LIHTC program because it's approaching its 40th birthday. When it first started, it was a test, right? It was a trial to see if it was actually going to be successful. And so that's why they had originally the 15 and then the 30 year to allow an out at 15 years. And so our current projects can go through, well, not our current projects. There was a long period of time where projects could go through the qualified contract process to exit the LIHTC program at year 15. We as a state have a big problem with the qualified contracts. We have a lot of projects that are going through that process and they are losing their affordability. And so we're right now it's a requirement to go to the 30 year, which is the LIHTC minimum. And a couple reasons that we continue to do the 30 year. We see a lot of projects come back in for resyndication. So they'll come back in for more credits at about year 20 to 25 to extend that affordability. We do see, especially out in our smaller communities out in Western Kansas, practically these programs don't change, or the housing doesn't change, the affordability doesn't change when the affordability falls off, when the 30-year expires, because those are units that are still being rented to households at 60% AMI. Those rents are still affordable to those levels, but it does get them out of the compliance requirements that we have to have. We have to go out and do the oversight. We have to be requiring those audits and those types of fees that have to be associated with that oversight. So at 30 years, when they can roll over and they can, that affordability expires, it actually a lot of times sets those projects up for success because they can maintain their operations. So I don't see it changing anytime soon, but I do think that properties that would benefit from affordability, they're still serving their community. There are opportunities to extend that affordability and rehab them and set them up for an additional 30 years.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll turn it back over to you, Alyssa.
Okay. Okay, so right now we're going to go through just the qualified allocation plan and how it's set up and the things that we do with our program. So we have a 9% and a 4% credit. And so we're going to focus on the 9%, and I'll touch base on the 4% at the end. So our 9% is it's a competitive program. We generally are oversubscribed to about 4 or 5 to 1. And so these are the things that we do to make sure that we're serving the whole state. The first thing is the maximum award per project is $850,000. So this is going to be an $850,000 10-year credit. So it's actually $8.5 million. And it also then will mean that they can get us the state credit for $850,000. From what we've heard from our discussions with developers, especially in our metropolitan communities, which Douglas County is one of, this will serve or build a project that's approximately 50 to 60 units, which we think is where we want to be in those metropolitan areas. No principal shall receive more than 2 awards each round. We have a small but mighty pool of developers in our state, and so we want to make sure that we are meeting the capacity, or we're not exceeding the capacity of our developers in our communities, and also that we are continuing to fund those developers that do great work with a limited resource. Principals may not have more than 4 projects not yet placed in service. So we all know it takes a long time to build a project. And so we need to make sure that those developers are continuing to push them through and go through the whole process. Once they get approved, they have to build it, but then they also have to go through the cost certification process, which can also be a lengthy process. And so we need to make sure that we're not getting these projects bottled up and they're continuing to churn through. So no principal can have more than 4 projects going at any point. I put an asterisk by there because if there are capacity concerns, our QAP does give us the flexibility to not approve up to the 4 if there are capacity concerns. No project we can have no more than 2 projects in a rural county and 3 projects in a metropolitan county approved each round. And with the state credit, this is an increased number. It used to be 1 in rural and 2 in metropolitan. So of the 7.7 million in credits, we have different pools that we try to hit. This is a moving target. It's changed every year since I've been at KHRC, and we'll continue to refine it. But this is how we want to see the projects approved this year. We want to do up to 20% of our LIHTCs on rehab projects. This is a lower number than in the past because we'd like to see our rehab project go on the 4% side. And we'll talk about that in a second. We want to see 25% of our available low-income housing tax credits on new construction in our metropolitan counties. And our metropolitan counties are defined as Douglas, Johnson, Sedgwick, Shawnee, and Wyandotte. 25% in our rural counties. And then we have our unique opportunities. And so that's going to be the projects that may not score well, or they have unique opportunities. Maybe they have a large, like an ARPA allocation, or we just approved a unique opportunity in Wyandotte County where it was a rehab of a 12-story building. So it was impossible to get it approved at the 850,000 level because it's one huge building. We're not going to approve half of it and not the other half. And so it had to be reviewed and considered outside of our general set-asides. And then the general set aside is going to be the remainder of the credits that we have left. What we had found last year and in previous years is that the next level of funding, right, the next highest scoring project or the next highest need of rehab project would throw us out of this percentage set asides that we have. And so we wanted to be able to, once we met our goals, that the rest of the projects go into a bigger pool and we can fund based on the best of that pool. So the next part of the QAP is our threshold eligibility. This is a long, lengthy piece of the QAP. I did want to just draw your attention to a few things that are in there. So these are the things that are required for all of our projects. The first is that all of our projects have to be notifying the Public Housing Authority that these projects are coming online, so that those voucher holders should be able to meet with the management company or submit their application to get into those units. The next is this income and rent targeting. This is something that we continue to work on. We know that we have plenty of voucher holders that have a voucher that cannot, that don't have landlords to take them. And so one of the things, and the low income housing tax credit, 60% AMI rent, and oftentimes, and especially in our metropolitan counties, that rent is higher than the voucher threshold level. And so one of the things that we were requiring now is that all of our new construction projects have to have 30% of those units have to be at that voucher level. In previous QAPs, it used to be 20%, and it was only on the 9% side. This is now going to be on all of our new construction projects on the 9 and 4%. And then if they elect that income averaging, this is where they also have to average to a lower level so that there's more units that are affordable to those voucher holders.
I have a question on
Mm-hmm.
if we're requiring 30% of those to be at that certain level, are we still able to meet the products that we need? Because like in Lawrence, I know we have a need for 2 and 3 bedroom units where we don't have as large a need for studio apartments, for instance. So are we still able, how does that apply? Because if I'm a developer, if I'm developing a thing to get my rent low, I'm getting a smaller apartment so I can get my rent down. So does that work? Does that cause us a problem unintended, or is that figured out?
So that's going to be looked at in a few different spaces. So one is if it's a development that has multiple unit types. So if there are studios 1s, 2s, and 3s in the development, they have to be spread out through the whole unit mix. So they can't be the 30% unit or the 40% AMI units cannot just be the studios. They have to be to spread out unless there is a compelling reason, like it's a permanent supportive housing and they're serving, single homeless men, then they can they can reach out and talk to us about that, and we may approve it on a case-by-case basis. The other thing is the market study that we require. If that market study says that they need housing for families and they're only proposing 1-bedroom units, that's a question and that's an evaluation spot that we'll be looking at.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next part is the selection criteria. We look at our rehabilitation projects and our new construction projects very differently. The rehabs, we do not score them. We fund them based on this list of criteria from most important to least important order. And so we will go out, we have a site inspector and he looks at all of these projects and he identifies which ones need the most work, which one are in the worst shape. And then we'll go down the list, looking at projects that USDA has identified as a priority site. That's our next priority. Projects that have project-based rent assistance, we want to make sure that those are staying in good shape and those are staying affordable. Then X is LIHTC resyndications, and on down the list. We think that on the new construction side, we really focus on the quality of the site. And this is something that rehabs, people live there. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing those spaces to be safe and affordable and decent places to live. And so we're not going to be reviewing the site like we do on the new construction side. So on new construction, this is the list of point categories. So these are all of the things that we're looking at. And so when these applications come in, they come in at two phases. They come in at preliminary application. And at preliminary, we are looking at the development team and the quality of the site. And so we give them then a preliminary score when that application comes in. And then we give them where that score sat within range of all the other preliminary new construction applications that they received. And then we invite them to submit a full application, or we don't, depending on where they fell in that site selection. And then they can choose to submit a full application. And then we'll score the rest of the pieces. This isn't in order of the preliminary and full. I recognize that. And so I'll try to identify which ones are scored at which space. But I just want to touch on what each of these are so that you guys can have an idea of what we're prioritizing when we are reviewing applications. So the first is the applicant and principal's experience. Have they done LIHTC deals before? We know these are complicated projects and they need some expertise. We need to understand that they know how this works. If they are a new applicant, then we require them to co-develop with an experienced applicant. This, Monty, is where you were asking about that successful below market loans and support. This is where we score them if they have a history of going for those resources. And so that would include local trust funds, Federal Home Loan Bank, local home funds, those kinds of things. So that's where we're giving credit for going after those resources in previous applications. We do have one penalty area, and so this is where we're going to penalize developers who have gone through the qualified contract process, so they have elected to remove their affordability. We will also give penalties for not meeting our threshold requirements or not giving us information when they sell a property or when they change management companies without going through those processes. We need to know what's happening at these properties, and so if they're not informing us, they'll also be receiving penalties. The next is underserved areas. Underserved areas are zip codes that have not received a LIHTC project in the last 5 years. So we are encouraging our developers to look at those spaces, and they get points for proposing a project that has not been funded in 5 years. This is not an end all be all. I think half of our projects are in areas that are not considered underserved, but we have had some success in our developers looking at these spaces. Subsequent phases are another thing that we prioritize. If a project is full and there is a waiting list and could utilize more units, then we will prioritize them. Residential character, are these properties near residential area? Are there other houses? Are there other units nearby? Quality site is a new point category this year, and it is admittedly completely subjective. We are committing to going out to all of these sites to see if it is a quality site. Are there, are there parks? Are there sidewalks? Is it walking distance from a school? Is there a senior center across the street? Some of these things that, you know it when you see it. And so we're looking to this to give some direction and some encouragement to those sites that are just, they just feel like good places to live. Proximity to amenities, we give points for being nearby those schools and those libraries and grocery stores, pharmacies, retail establishments. Below market loans and support. So this is where you get points if you have committed below market loans and support at the time of application. And this will also include donated land from the city, and it can include reduced fees, hookup fees, anything like that. So this encompasses a lot of things, not just the trust funds. If a community has a community revitalization plan, the project is being proposed there, we give points for that. Opportunity sites. We used to utilize a program through Enterprise 360 that looked at every single census tract in the nation and gave them a ranking. That system shut down. It was very expensive and it was free. And so it proved to not be a viable business option. So we utilized a RDG planning and design that did our state housing needs assessment. And they did a review of the census tracts within the state. And those sites are given different rankings. And so projects that come in, we'll look at the ranking of those sites for scoring. We also get points for deeper income targeting if it's a senior proposal that is offering services, and if it's a family site that has a certain percentage of units at the 3-bedroom level, we'll give points for that. Projects that go even deeper affordability by electing to not to have any units that are above fair market rate, those get points. And then for home ownership projects that are going to be owned by a nonprofit, we give those special consideration also. And then there's tiebreakers if we have projects that score the same thing. So this is a visual of how we want to allocate our resources. So this is the 20% for rehab, 25% for non-metro new, 20% for rural or metro new, unique opportunities, and then the remaining live techs. Our underwriting standards, they have to meet all of these things. A pro forma that looks like a project can operate for 30 years. We want to look at those operating expenses, make sure they're reasonable, and they compare to other projects that are being funded at that time. Reserves, replacement reserves, operating reserves, to make sure that these projects are, going to be able to serve and meet the needs of the operations for the 30 years. Have they talked to syndicators? Have they talked to loan providers? Developer fee. So these projects are different than market rate units, where the profit, the profit is very slim on these projects, even when they first come out when they first start leasing up. And so the difference is they get their developer fee as part of their development budget. And so we have limits on those. And it depends on if it's a new construction, if it's a large project, or if it's a rehab. And so we have stated maximums for those developer fees. And then we have standards if they want to get the home in the National Housing Trust Fund.
So, sorry,
yeah,
what is your this is fascinating. I mean, it's super
good.
helpful.
I'm glad. I hope this is helpful.
Yeah. So what's the maximum fee that you guys allow for LIHTC?
So on the new construction side, it's $20,000 a unit, and then on the rehab, it's based on the work being done on the project. I don't know what that exact percentage is, but it's a percentage of construction costs. And then we'll talk about that developer fee. If they don't get a check for $1.2 million at the beginning of the project, it's paid out throughout the construction. And then oftentimes a developer defers most of that fee as part of a source for the project.
Right. Okay, thanks.
So the 4% side, this is so all of the stuff that we've been talking about has been on the 9%, which is, the competitive resource. So 4% tax credit projects are a different animal all on their own. The 4% allocation is based on a state's private activity bond allocation. So every state has a level of private activity bonds that they can allocate as a state. Kansas is a small state minimum state. And so I think our allocation is approximately $350 million a year that we can allocate through private activity bonds. How 4% credit works is they receive credit based on the allocation of private activity bonds and their eligible expenses. There is no limit on 4% credits. It's just the limit is the limit of activity bond allocations. With the allocation of this new state credit, we anticipate that our 4% credit will be utilized way more than it has in the past. So we have typically done 4 to 5 projects a year on the 4% side. These projects are hard to make work because 50% of the development budget has to be funded by private activity bonds to be eligible for 4% credit. And so they have a lot more debt on them, and they have to have a lot more cash flow. And so on the new construction side, that generally means a large project. The the union at the Loop project that's happening in Lawrence right now, that is a 4% project. Those projects are hard to make work if they are under 100 units, period. On the rehab side, they have to have cash flow. And so oftentimes those projects are going to be public housing authority units because they're going to have the vouchers, the place-based vouchers, also then the tenant income. And so they're able to pay the debt service on those private activity bonds with the income that's generated through those vouchers. But with the state credit, there's going to be a new equity source, and it's going to be a substantial equity source. And so we think that these projects are going to be still difficult to make work, but easier. And so we are restructuring how that program works in the upcoming year. It used to be, it's a rolling application. They would submit the application. If it worked and it met all of our threshold eligibility, we would approve it. That's not going to be how it can work anymore. So what we will be doing is 3 rounds of 4% deals. In each round, we will be allocating approximately $75 million of private activity bonds. So we'll be looking at approximately $225 million in private activity bonds throughout the year and the credits attached to that. For new construction, we want to utilize 40% of that activity. For new construction, each project has to get a threshold of 33 points, and then we will award based on a number of things. And one of the reasons why we can't, or we don't believe that we can look at a straight point calculation is because there's only a few communities in the state of Kansas that can take on a 4% new construction deal because of the size that they have to be. And those are going to include Douglas County, Sedgwick County, Johnson County, Wyandotte County. And so we can't have all of these projects, swooping in on Johnson County at the same time. And so we need to make sure that they're coming online, they're leasing up, and then we can go to the next project. And so, we're going to be looking at that selection criteria, the demand of those units, and then we're also putting a 1.5 mile radius moratorium for, I think, 2 years to make sure that we're giving these projects a chance to lease up, and then we'll move on to the next one. Rehab, it's going to be another 40%, and we'll evaluate and recommend the same as the 9%. So the need of those units first, and then down the list of priorities. This is the timeline of the 9% projects that we do. We start drafting the QAP early summer. We release it for comment in July. We release the final QAP in September. The application is then released in October. Our 9% preliminary applications are due at the end of January. We will invite full applications in the middle of February. They will be due in May, and we will make those announcements in June. And this is how it generally looks every year. The 4% credits, these are the due dates for the next year for the 3 rounds. So January 6th, April 14th, and July 14th is when we will be accepting 4% applications. I know I'm running really long, I think. So I just wanted to show really quickly what the financial stack of some of these projects can look like. These are just general examples, but it's just really to show that the LIHTC equity is a piece of the project, and no project can happen it's just a LIHTC project. All of our projects have conventional debt on them. The yellow line is that deferred fee. So that it can be a substantial part of the budget that they are deferring a large part of their developer fee to make the project work. You can see in Douglas County, this project has state resources, so that would be the trust fund. In Sedgwick County, this had KHRC soft financing, so that would be the home or the National Housing Trust Fund. Saline project, that project had historic tax credits to help make that one work. In Western Kansas, that was conventional debt was the main gap closer. And then that 4% project, you can see that tax exempt bond is a huge part of that project. And then the LIHTC equity is substantially smaller than the other ones because the 4% credit it's only 4% of the eligible expenses, whereas the 9% is 9%. So you can see the difference there. That's all of our contact information. We are, our communications department does a lot of work. They are everywhere. So I encourage you to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and get on our mailing list. We do a really good job of updating what's coming out, what's going on, and really encourage you to keep up on that. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was a lot of information.
It was a lot, and I apologize for that, and
Relatively-
I'm not really sure what else to do about that.
No, thank you. Are there any questions? I'm going to open up for quick questions, and then we need to also get on with our agenda. So,
Christina Gentry. I have this question. As a board member, Christina Gentry, board member who has received housing subsidies. I want to thank you today for this very informative presentation. I've been a board member now for 2 years, and though the LIHTC information packet comes in real thick and you can read it, I prefer and I really appreciate the auditory and the PowerPoints. My question really was about the criteria and including in the criteria for the underserved areas. Could you go into a little bit more detail about what that criteria includes for the underserved areas? I'm just curious. I want to make sure I got all of my understanding of what that looks like. So I'm thinking about public transportation and the closeness and the proximity to transportation for some of the people who would be in these units. So could maybe get a little bit more detail about what that looks like for the criteria for the 9% awarded?
Yep. So that's a good question. So the straight underserved area selection criteria is just if that zip code has not been served in the last 5 years, it becomes an underserved area. But we look at the transportation and the access to healthcare and daycares and all of those things in other spaces of the selection criteria. And so that's going to be accounted for in the opportunity sites and in the proximity to amenities. So the proximity to amenities it's a long list. I think it's like 25 things that we're looking to see, and each development gets each proposal, I think, gets 1 point for each thing that they're close to. And so we're looking at those items. But then on the other side, we also know that there are communities there are sites that communities want to reinvest in, or they want to see these spaces build up. They're putting in their own resources. And so the other side of that is that community reinvestment portion. And so if a community has identified that site as a space to invest in and through other transportation resources or other things, we also give credit for that also.
Thank you.
Christina, did you have any other questions? Okay, thanks. This is Shannon Reed, Douglas County Commissioner. Hi, Alyssa. It's nice to see your face. It's been a long time. Just to piggyback off of Christina's question, which I appreciate, I wanted to ask if there are any zip codes in Douglas County that you can identify as, I know that's not a totally Lawrence specific, so I'm going to guess that there might not be any in Lawrence, but curious if there are, and curious if any underserved zip codes exist in our county, especially since we're in the metro category, but also have some rural communities. So I'm just curious from that perspective.
That's a good question. I will, I'll put a snip to Leah and she can post it. So we have just the list of counties that are not underserved. And so I'm not sure which ones exactly are Douglas County, but
that's okay. Don't worry about spending time, but yeah, if you could follow up, I'd just be interested to see that. Thanks.
And it's nice to see you too.
okay. Smonte Sokup Chair, see no more comments. Thank you, Alyssa. Very nice presentation and great information. And thank you. And we're going to move on to the next agenda item.
Great. Thank you for your time, and look forward to work with you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Second item, receives quarter 3 2022 reports. So the 2022 Affordable Housing Trust Fund grantees. Assuming that's a staff report.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. The quarter 3 reports are attached to the agenda, and I will share the screen and bring them up for folks to review. I will quickly summarize where the projects are at. The Housing Stabilization Collaborative has served 1,121 households with the trust funds, and they have expended all of the trust funds allocation. for 2022. I think they expended it all, in Q3. So they won't be serving, they haven't served anybody with trust funds in Q4. And there's some narrative if you all want to spend some time reading that, but I'm not going to go through the narrative. Independence Inc. did not serve anybody for accessibility modifications in Q3. The Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority did not serve any households in Q3 due to lack of referrals from partner agencies for the New Horizon program. And my understanding is they are looking for new partnerships for that program so that they can begin getting referrals again for serving households. The Lawrence Habitat for Humanity served one household and 8 families. So it's a cooperative housing unit that they served so that they were able to support 8 individual households living under one roof with the critical systems repair program. And again, you can read the narrative on your own time. And then the tenants to homeowners program projects, they have 2 projects this year that were funded by the trust funds. They gave some progress reports, but the construction has not started on either of them. Any questions?
Leah, this is Shannon with the Housing Authority. And I think our reports read no new families in Q3 because we have existing families that we are continuing to support.
This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. Yeah, the way that the quarterly reports work, that it asks for new families served during the quarter. So the previous quarters will show those families that were served, and then the year-end report will show the cumulative families served throughout the year. So thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments? We should have the year-end reports in January, and we'll look at those, in February, and we'll look at those at the March AHAB meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Leah. Are there any other questions for Leah on the report? Okay. Seeing none. We'll move on to the third. I don't believe there's any action required on that other than receiving the reports. So item 3 is schedule the 2023 Affordable Housing Advisory Board retreat and discuss the goals and objectives for the retreat. I believe that Leah sent out a doodle poll to try to select a few dates. There were many members could be there. I'm sure we're not going to get a date where every member can be there. And ideally, we would like to do this retreat in person, if at all possible. Do you want to speak more about that, Leah? Do you have some comments on that?
Sure. This is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. So to start, just to give some context to the goals of the retreat, and then I believe that Monty will open it up for additional recommendations for the goals and objectives of that retreat. But the AHAB originally set initial 5-year goals, and this is the final year of those initial 5-year goals. And so the primary purpose of the retreat is to look at the next 5-year goals and accompanying priority strategies for the AHAB to achieve those goals. The retreat will be facilitated by Christina Holt, who is with KU Center for Community Health and Development. And in speaking with her, she has just asked if it could be either an all virtual retreat or an all in-person retreat with a priority on coming together in person. And so that's a discussion for you all to have if everybody's able to make it in person. And then just finally to offer for your consideration and discussion was the doodle poll to select the date. The top choice was January 30th from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And then the second choice was February 13th from either 9 to 1 or 10 to 2. And if the AHAB could go ahead and make a decision today, if possible, on the time and date and format of the retreat and any additional goals or objectives for the retreat that would be helpful so that we can prepare Christina and all of you for that date.
Okay, thank you, Leah. I see Christina has her hand up, so you don't have your hand up? Okay.
I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was my cursor on my own screen. Sorry, Christina. Thomas has his hand up.
So noting that the most popular time was January 30th at 8:30 a.m., I would make a motion that we have our retreat on January 30th at 8:30 a.m.
This
All
is
right.
Shannon Oury, a second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let's talk about that. What other people feel about that? Go ahead, Edith.
I will not be in person on January 30th. I'm sorry. But that, of course, you cannot have everyone.
Right. I would also ask, I don't think the doodle poll included any evening times, and I want to be sensitive to people that maybe their jobs aren't as flexible. So I guess I would ask the question if we should consider any evening times for a retreat, or if people really do not want to do that. Happy to.
My preference would be not to have it in the evening.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Sarah Waters at KU. I know another one of our agenda items is new board members coming on. So don't know if we should hear some about that. And I'm wondering if they're going to be appointed in January, if it'd be hard to get them, or if it might be easier to get them on the February date, give them a little bit more time with their schedule, just as a consideration. I'm available either day. That has been put out there in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So just as another thought you might not think about.
Any other thoughts on that?
It's Christina Gentry. I appreciate the thoughts of new membership inclusion, and I'm available 8:30 in person for the January 30th if that's what we decide upon.
Okay.
This is Shannon Reed, Douglas County Commissioner. I agree with Sarah's point about maybe some discussion about the membership changes could be had and what staff knows about that and how to assess that availability. And on that note, in January, at the beginning of January, it'll probably be our January 11th meeting, which is our second meeting of the year for the Douglas County Commission, is when we annually do new appointments of commissioners to various community boards. I am interested in joining the CJCC, which is a monthly meeting with a fairly heavy lift. So I intend to ask one of my fellow commissioners to gauge interest and make an appointment for different commissioners to join this. So I just, an FYI, I didn't fill out the doodle poll because of that, and not sure which commissioner it will be. Also, to be fair, there's some, I think, continued conversation for us to have with the city, especially as the city is reorganizing its boards and whatnot, about how that seat is defined, given the fact that the HSC is a part of Douglas County government now. And, the ongoing conversations with this board and the city about conflicts of interest. So I just put that out there to say that I don't really have any availability to consider, but figuring out how many new folks there might be to consider availability with seems important. So I'm curious if maybe we could hear from staff about that.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. Yeah, that was something that I had considered and that Monty and I had briefly discussed. I'm aware that there are a few members that will be stepping away from the AHAB. And later in the agenda, there's an opportunity for those members to speak. And then one member who will be terming off. And in terms of the reappointments, that is up to the discretion and timeline of the mayor. And so sometimes that happens rather quickly, and sometimes those seats can stay open for, a month or two, or even several, sometimes depending on how quickly that happens. And so if the AHAB would rather wait to schedule the retreat until all the new appointments have been made, we can certainly think about having a spring retreat instead, and just, maintaining our current goals until that retreat happens and we have an opportunity to set new 5-year goals. In terms of the city advisory board and committee reorganization, that will likely be at least another 3 to 6 months before any decisions are finalized, is my understanding. So that is an additional consideration.
All right. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Shannon Lowry, Housing Authority. I kind of agree that the whole point of getting new people on the retreat's the best place to catch people up on where we've come from and what we've done. And if we have new people, then we're going to need to know what their thoughts are about our goals going forward, so that we kind of get a better idea about what we're going to do with that matrix and how we're going to do our grant applications and everything. And so I'd hate to see us do a retreat and then turn around and need to redo it because we have 3-4 new people who also should legitimately have input in that.
Thank you, Shannon. Leah, I have a question, I guess. Monty Sokup, Chair. If we went out to March and looked in March, does that impact something else down the road? Because I think by March, we would probably most likely have our new appointments. Maybe give us a little time. Maybe we'll know a little bit more about what the city is going to do. As long as it doesn't impact any processes we have in place to do things. Because I think we're going to take, again, we might know more about the matrix and studying that. So you're saying it doesn't have a great impact on process if we went to March?
No, this is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. I think that would be fine.
Okay.
And we could wait, if the AHAB wishes, we could wait until those new appointments are made and then resend out the doodle poll for times in March.
Well, and we may be able to ask, not put pressure on the mayor, but we could ask the mayor to try to get the appointments ahead of that time. So, okay. So does anybody object to pushing it out? If we were to try to push it out to March and find another date, do another doodle poll. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. So I think we need to either act on that or it needs to be, I don't know if there's a way to pull
I
that
think
back.
what we do, if that's the decision that we're going to take, then we just all vote it down.
Vote negatively. Okay.
Yep.
So, so here's where we are. We have a motion on the floor to have it on January 30th. We've heard from staff that it would be okay to push it out to March. So if you want to have the meeting on January 30th, you need to vote affirmatively. And if you would like to push it out to a later date, you need to vote negatively on this action, on this motion. Does everybody understand that? Is there any other discussion on this before I call the roll? Okay, I'm going to call the roll. Ron Gacious.
Pass.
Christina Gentry.
Push out to a later date.
I didn't understand that. Did somebody catch that?
No, I'm voting to pass, which is to push to a later date. Did I get that vote right?
Okay,
So
Edith.
Okay,
I don't know.
Anyway, so, okay, I'm not quite understanding. So if you want to have it on the 30th, you vote yes. If you want to have it at a later date to yet to be determined, you vote no.
I'm voting no.
No. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Edith Guffey,
No.
Thomas Howe,
No.
Erica Zimmerman,
No.
no. Shannon Reed,
No.
Sarah Waters,
No.
Tom Allen,
No.
Monty Sokup, no. Motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Monty,
8 no, or motion is denied.
I
Sorry.
also vote no.
Oh, I missed you. I'm sorry. I didn't have you. So Shannon Ori is a no. So motion is fails, 9 against, 1 abstention. Okay. So at this point, I guess we would direct Leah to try to do another doodle poll for March, probably not during the final 4 week. And let's try to find a new date, and then we'll work towards getting with the new mayor and trying to get our appointments as soon as reasonably possible. Okay. So that moves us on to item 4. Consider forming a committee to update Affordable Housing Trust Fund award process and procedures, including application timeline, review matrix, and scoring, and notice of funding opportunity. Leah and I have talked about this, and trying to get that work done in this group, outside of having many hours of work sessions, does not seem like a thing that this we can do in these our regular monthly meetings. So we thought that considering making a smaller group to put something together and bring it back to this group to review and either approve or not approve might be a good way to move this forward, because we all seem to have some dissatisfaction with our current process, or at least concerns about our current process. So I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on that. And if we can, ultimately move to a point where we would make a motion to form the committee, to form a committee to look at this. Any thoughts?
This is Christina Gentry. Mr. Chair, do you feel, just my thoughts here, do you feel a little bit preempted to form these subcommittees, considering we are looking at new membership and maybe quite a few new members in the coming next few months? Or is this still maybe a good time for us to consider creating the subgroups now, with the anticipation that we may or may not have the same people working together? Just a thought.
Yeah. So this is Monty Sokup, Chair. I'm having difficulty understanding you through the audio here, but I think what you asked is, do you think we should wait to have our new members be involved in that? And I think that if we form the committee, if somebody comes on that's interested, we could certainly add them. But I think the committee, people on the committee that worked with the current matrix probably have a better understanding of the difficulty we've, had filling it out and the difficulties we've had with it. So maybe that group can, create something new. And then certainly those new people would be on board, before we approve this and have opportunity for input. So I think that I think the timeline, we got to jump at some point. So Shannon, do you have okay. Anyone else?
This is Sarah Waters with KU. That's, again, I'm just putting it out there because, again, and it's a no-brainer. What I'm going to say is that is like a lot of work, which is what you're asking. The application plus timeline plus. So I actually am, so again, I think it's really important, but I'm trying to also think of how that work would get done, other than you just start somewhere and see where you can get. So to me, the timeline of that's important too, because the timeline of when we put the notice of funding out has been questioned as well. So so I don't know if there's something that it should start with first, just, I don't know, because wow, right? But you're right, Monty. We've been talking about this for years. Needs to get some work done.
Right. And I think mostly, as I have thought about this and had conversations with a few people, including you, I think we start with the matrix and kind of figure out what the things we want to evaluate are. And then the application form and that stuff will come into line so that it aligns with what we're asking about in the matrix. So we've got to figure out what those criteria are we really want to know about and how we ask those questions. And I think the rest of that'll, it certainly it's work, but it should fall into place if we get the right things in the matrix and in the application. So I'm not, yes, it's a lot of work, but again, we need to start it. We have to start somewhere. So I'm thinking that, we're a smaller group to start this work.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And we can move faster.
The approach. Can I ask maybe clarifying though? When we were doing our awards at the last meeting, that those funds were being talked about as becoming available in the spring, like by January potentially, and we were talking potentially about the possibility of an early spring cycle. So I'm wondering, again, it's a separate, but do we have something that's coming sooner that we should start this with? Or I'm just trying to understand or where, and I'll say, I volunteer to help with this. So if you're looking for volunteers, I'd be happy to help this, assuming my board reappointment gets approved by the mayor, my request, because my term is up, but I've asked to be reappointed, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly that's an issue. We may ultimately have to go through another award without having this in place. That's one possibility. So I guess at this point, I certainly don't want to cut off conversation, but if I would ask that someone move to form an affordable housing trust fund, to form a committee to study the matrix and the award process.
Mr. Chair, I would make that motion, but I would with a minor amendment. I don't think it should be a committee. I think it should be a task force.
Okay.
With very defined timeframes on it. And so I would move that we form a task force for reviewing all of our SOPs.
Okay. Thank you. It's
Edith Guppy, I second the motion.
okay. So we have a motion and a second to form a task force to study this. Any other comments? I think the other thing that Thomas brought up is having a timeline and whatnot. And I think if we form the task force and put some people on it, they can start looking at it and figure out what a reasonable timeline is and come back to this group.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the roll again. This is to form the task force. Ron Gacious.
Yes.
Christina Gentry.
Yes.
Edith Guffey.
Yes.
Thomas Howe.
Yes.
Erica Zimmerman.
Yes.
Shannon Reed.
Yes.
Sarah Waters.
Yes.
Tom Allen.
Yes.
Shannon Oury.
Yes.
Monty Sokup. Yes. That is 10. That motion passes 10-0. At this point, I guess I would ask people to reach out to Leah if you're interested in being on that task force. And then we'll see what kind of response we have. And if we need to ask for more people, we will. I may be calling you. You just never know. So that moves us on to item number 5, and that is consider canceling the January 2023 full Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting. Leah, do you want to talk about that and why we're talking about that?
Sure. This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. Well, I will be out in January, and certainly there are other staff to support, but we don't have any pressing business items that have to be done in January. And my thought was that by canceling the meeting, it would give the time for the task force to meet, and it wouldn't be such a burden on folks' time that did want to serve on that task force. But again, certainly if the AHAB wishes to go ahead and meet in January, then there can be another staff member from the city here to support.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Leah. Are there any questions about that? If I see none, I would accept a motion to cancel the January 2023 Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting and then to pick up with our regular meeting in February.
And Mr. Chair, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors representative, I would move that we cancel the meeting with the proviso that if we can get the group together in time, that might be a good time to have a task force.
Okay.
Shannon Lowry, I second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any comments on that? Okay, so Tom, if you would restate the motion.
Yes, I move that we would cancel the normal January Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting, and if possible, to replace it with the task force, the review task force meeting.
Okay. All right. So that is the motion on the floor. I'm going to read the roll. Ron Gacious.
Aye.
Christina Gentry.
Yes.
Edith Guffey.
Yes.
Thomas Howe.
Yes.
Erica Zimmerman.
Yes.
Shannon Reed.
Yes.
Sarah Waters.
Yes.
Tom Allen.
Yes.
Shannon Ori.
Yes.
Monty Sokup, yes. Motion passes 10-0. So our January meeting will be canceled. And in lieu of that, the task force will be meeting on the matrix that on the task force meeting. So keep that on your calendar if you call Leah to volunteer for that. And we'll get that figured out since she's going to be gone at that time. That is the end of our regular agenda. So we have member updates. Update on Affordable Housing Advisory Board membership transitions. So Leah, are you doing that update?
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. I was wondering if AHAB members who will be transitioning off would like to take the opportunity to notify your fellow members, or I'm certainly willing and happy to make those announcements to the members that have communicated that to me. But I am aware that there will be several members who will be transitioning off. And so this might be a good time if there are any, if you wish to share that.
This is Shannon Reed, Douglas County Commission. Well, sorry for skipping ahead on the agenda earlier, but just take the opportunity, since this will be my last meeting, to say farewell to all of you in this space. I know many of you, and I will cross paths elsewhere in the community, but appreciate everybody's work, and yeah, I'll miss it, but ready to have some fresh perspective here also.
Shannon, thank you for your service to this committee. It's been appreciated and valued. Thanks. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative. I'll be leaving my my second term 1 year early, effective the end of December. It's been a wonderful experience. We've done a lot of great work, and I look forward to continuing to be active in the housing space, and I'll be visiting with many of you I know in the future. Thank you all very much for your service and making it a great pleasure to represent the Chamber on behalf of city housing issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciated your service as well. And I like that you come and you sit next to me at the boardroom at the meetings. Anyone else transitioning that wants to make a comment?
Yes, Tom Allen, member at large. My term's expiring, and I'm fortunate that I'm getting a promotion at the university, which will entail lots of committee work. And more importantly, my teaching schedule tends to vary a lot, so I've always had some conflicts. But I wanted to share that, coming from the design profession, I hope you all keep me in mind for helping with any visioning exercises in the future, where I'm always looking for good opportunities to connect and take on new design projects. So thank you all for letting me serve with you, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure, certainly. Anyone else? All right, wonderful.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. Rebecca Buford, the tenants to homeowners rep, is not present today, but her term also expires.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will be nominating a new representative to serve. And my understanding is that as long as that mayoral appointment is made in January, that he will be joining the January meeting. So lots of changes.
Yeah, a lot of change coming up.
And
but that's good. It's good and bad. It's sad in one way, and it's good that we'll have some fresh ideas, like Shannon said. And always, it's good to know there's, obviously interest in this and interest in the committee. So with that, I'm going to move on to update.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, sorry. That's okay.
No,
I'm missing someone else.
No, I just wanted to, no, there's nobody else. I just wanted to, and you may cue this up at the end, but just to remind folks that if there's any interest in chair or vice chair, that election will happen now at the February meeting. And so that is an additional transition that may occur depending on who is interested and nominated. That is all.
All right. Okay. Am I okay to go?
Shannon Reed, Douglas County Commission. I just have a quick question just to clarify. I think I heard Sarah mention it earlier, but I noticed that Sarah Waters and Christina Gentry both have terms expiring. Are you both hoping to be reappointed or have requested to?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks, Shannon. I hold the KU seat, and this is Sarah Waters. I've requested to be reappointed by the mayor after speaking with the chancellor's office here, because that's the seat that I'm in, and I'm eligible for one more term. So would like to serve again and hopefully get that opportunity.
Thank you, Shannon. This is Christina Gentry. My position here is board as a member who has received public housing. So I intend to keep my position. I also hopefully will be reappointed by the mayor. I submitted my reapplication as well. So hopefully it's approved and I get to continue doing the great work with these folks, the new ones and the older ones.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I will tell the mayor that I hope you both are reappointed. So thank you for continuing to serve. Thanks, Chair. Go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that as well. All right. Is it okay to move off this agenda item now?
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right. Update on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund City Commission approval. As you know, we forwarded a recommendation to the City Commission last week. I was there to answer comments. They approved all of the projects as recommended, except the Union project. And they were concerned about a few things on that, in particular, the amount of the developer fee. I did my best to explain this board's rationale for the award that we had made. But I think they are going to work with Leah and ask us to review that and come back to them. Is that a fair statement, Leah? I don't believe we've received a lot of direct input as to what they wanted to do, just that they were kind of sending that back to us.
Yeah, this is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. The commission was interested in some additional clarity and information regarding the developer fee specifically. And so we have reached out to the Annex Group and started gaining more clarity on that. And the recommendation was not approved nor denied. And so once we gather some additional information and see what some options are, then that will go back to the commission for reconsideration. And I will notify the AHAB as soon as that's on the next city commission agenda.
Yeah. And I would say that my basic explanation to them was that, yes, we did recognize the fee was high, that they had asked for $750,000 and we awarded $400,000. And that when you looked at other metrics of that project, that they were good metrics, you know, the cost per unit that we were subsidizing and those kind of things were all very positive, and that this committee felt that that was, an appropriate allocation to that project. So obviously that wasn't sufficient. So we'll be working on that some more, and I look forward to that, seeing what we can come up with, whether that's a modified recommendation or pushing that recommendation back to them. If we come to the same conclusion, I don't know where we'll go yet, but obviously we have a little more work to do on that. But
this is Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator. And I would say that the discussion both in the AHAB and the City Commission just brings to light that, additional work is needed on the trust funds matrix and application, maybe some standardization of how the budget is presented and reviewed. And perhaps there's an expectation or limit set by the AHAB that could then be recommended for approval by the commission on what an appropriate developer fee might be. It's similar to, length of affordability. So I think that'll be really great work for the task force to consider.
Right. And, I specifically asked a question with Alyssa today and wrote down some numbers here about what the LIHTC, because there is a limit, as I heard her conversation, which I will follow up with her about a limitation on the developer fee on LIHTC awarded projects. So, I'm assuming at this point that it fell within those requirements. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have to help with this conversation we're going to have coming up. So when we get more direction, we'll be bringing that back to the committee to take a look at and figure out what we're going to do. Any other questions on that?
Monty?
Yeah, go ahead, Edith.
Yeah, I just like to say from the presentation we had this morning, which I also thought was very, very helpful, and would recommend for new members as they come that they go back and look at this video so that they can have benefit of this presentation as they join. It appeared to me that the developer fee may not be as clear cut as we think. That we're just looking at one piece of it, because if it passed the LIHTC standard, it may be much more complicated, because they talked about that this was not an easy project, how complicated this project was. And we should probably delve into that more before we just say developer fee was so high. So.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. So there's no action item on that. So seeing no further comments, I'm going to move on to the third update. The December 13th City Commission agenda item, amending City Code Chapter 10, Article 1. I'm going to let you read the sections to provide equal opportunity housing regardless of source of income or as status as a survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, or stalking. As you guys would recall, that's something that this committee looked at and ultimately pushed on to Human Resources Committee. Am I getting that right?
Relations.
And that is now coming back to the City Commission on Tuesday night, if I recall correctly. I plan to be there personally to speak on behalf of it. I don't know. I would love it if I could get consensus from this committee where I could represent the committee at that meeting. To represent that we are in support of this document and reviewed it and made recommendations. I know there were some things in it that this committee didn't love, but I think overall it's a good change.
Hey, Monty, this is Shannon Oury.
Mhm.
Is the pet provision still in what is going to be considered on Tuesday, or has that been stripped out?
I do not know that.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. What is being presented to the City Commission is a modified version of what was previously presented to the AHAB and developed by the committee. Currently, it does not have the pet provision included, and it's much more narrow in scope. And so really, it does focus on those two items, the source of income non-discrimination for voucher holders and non-discrimination for survivors. I should have, in hindsight, I should have linked to the City Commission agenda item so that you all could review that. I will include it in the minutes, but that is live online for anybody who's interested in pulling that up and reviewing the agenda item report. You can review what specifically is included in that.
Well, given that, then I'm in favor of Monty representing us, saying that we are, not only are we in support of it, but that we champion it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative. I second Shannon's motion.
All right. So we have, I guess we're gonna have an official action here to allow me to represent this committee at the chamber or at the City Commission meeting. So we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair,
Any comments?
this is Christina Gentry. Trying to adjust my audio. Am I coming in clearer now? Okay, I'm just going to speak. This is Christina Gentry, board member. Monty, I will also be in attendance. I'll be speaking and giving a testimony just to my experience of being a Section 8 voucher recipient. So I really respect you are going to be there and joining in attendance as well, but I'll be speaking for my behalf, and good to have your support and the support of the board as well.
All right, wonderful. I will see you there then. So we have a motion and
Further discussion.
Yeah, we have further discussion.
This is Shannon Reed, Douglas County Commission. I just want to quickly clarify with Leah. Well, one, make a request that if a link could be sent out this afternoon just to make sure we get to the right agenda packet and the right meeting, I would appreciate that. And to clarify, is there still any work on I don't have it right in front of me, I'm sorry, but the other chapter and like inclusive screening requirements? Is it, you said it's narrowly focused now, so maybe that's just been eliminated and I'm just curious.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. To my understanding, there will be a recommendation made to look at the additional sections. So what is being presented now is more narrow in scope. And again, that's, to my knowledge, that will be the recommendation, is to then look at the inclusive screening criteria and the enforcement aspect of it.
Okay, so they're taking up the issues separately then, it sounds like, instead of together. Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate that clarification, and I so certainly hope that there's plenty of consensus here for you, Monty, and a formal action to represent those of us who can't be there.
Okay, is it further discussion? If not, I'll call the roll. All right, I'm gonna call the roll. Ron Gaseous.
Yes.
Christina Gentry.
Yes.
Edith Guffey.
Yes.
Thomas Howe.
Yes.
Erica Zimmerman.
Yes.
Shannon Reed.
Yes.
Sarah Waters.
Yes.
Thomas Allen.
Yes.
Shannon Ori,
Yes.
Monty Soka, yes. Motion passes 10-0 to support that, and I will represent that at the meeting on Tuesday. Thank you. One small step for us, on a many step journey. So, okay, moving on, we'll go to the calendar. In February of 2023, we're going to elect an advisory board and vice chair and a vice chair. We'll receive the annual report and discuss the Housing Trust Fund grant cycle process recommendations. So hopefully we'll have something to come out of that January meeting as well to inform that. And then in March, we'll receive Affordable Housing Trust Fund final reports. And then also in March, we'll be having our retreat sometime. So please respond to Leah's email regarding a doodle poll so we can try to get a good date or a couple good dates to consider for that. With that, is there any new business from any members, committee members? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for your work today. Appreciate it.
You had the gavel, you didn't bang it.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It's not too